Good morning. My name is Tanisha Gupta. My roll number is 19112101. I am from Chemical Engineering Department, second year, fourth semester, and this is my assignment 1. The topic of my assignment is capacity and economy of evaporators. First of all, what is evaporation? Evaporation is a unit process that consists of the elimination of water of a fluid food by means of vaporization or boiling. Evaporation is the removal of solvent as a vapor from a solution or slurry. It can be any type of vaporization that occurs on the surface of a liquid as it changes into the gas phase. The surrounding gas must not be saturated with the evaporating substance. When the molecules of the liquid collide, they transfer energy to each other based on how they collide. When a molecule near the surface absorbs enough energy to overcome the vapor pressure, it will escape and enter the surrounding air as gas. Evaporation is an endothermic process. It is the concentration of aqueous solutions by removal of water from solution by boiling the liquor in the suitable vessel called evaporator and withdrawing the vapor. We can see evaporation happening everywhere, whether it is clothes drying faster in hotter weather or industrial applications like printing and coating, recovering salts from solution and drying a variety of materials such as lumber, paper, cloth or chemicals. It is used in different purposes with different industries, like concentration of fresh foods such as fruit juices is an economic way to make use of perishable crops during peak harvest season. In the same way, in the food process industry, food products are concentrated to increase their shelf life, reduce volume and weight, reduce storage cost, reduce transportation cost, and increase value. Lower water activity, which is a general indication of microbiological stability, preserves concentrated food. In the chemical and craft paper industry, evaporation is often used to recover valuable non-volatile chemicals. For example, in the craft pulping process, water is evaporated from spent cooking oil, that is, black liquor, which concentrates the solids. The concentrated inorganic process chemicals can then be refined for reuse within the process. In pharmaceutical industry, evaporation is often used to create a concentrated solution, which can then be dried to create a powdered product. Now, let us move on to evaporators. What are evaporators? An evaporator is a device in a process used to turn the liquid form of a chemical substance such as water into its gaseous form or vapor. The liquid is evaporated or vaporized into a gas form of the targeted substance in that process. Evaporators are the heart of any evaporation desalination process. Moreover, they are an essential element in several industrial applications that include chemical, petroleum, and food process. Evaporators are used to separate materials based on differences in their boiling temperatures. Its purpose is to concentrate non-volatile solutes such as organic compounds, inorganic salts, acids or bases. Typical solutes include phosphoric acid, caustic soda, sodium chloride, sodium sulfate, gelatin, syrups and urea. The evaporator configuration is basically based on creating a hot surface where heating steam condenses on one side and the vapor on the other side. Evaporators are nowadays commonly used to concentrate food by using heat to evaporate water from the food. As the liquid is concentrated, its boiling point is elevated. Using low pressure boiling of liquid fluids is carried out at low temperatures and the heat liable food attributes are preserved. Different type of evaporators are used in different type of food industry. Heat and mass balances are used in calculation to design single and multiple effect evaporators. Steam economy gives an indication of process efficiency. Vapor recompression systems such as thermal or mechanical are useful in minimizing energy use. But the most important thing to remember is choosing the right type of evaporators based on the characteristic of products and the desired results. Now let us learn about different type of evaporators. First is natural or forced circulation evaporator. Natural circulation evaporators are based on the natural circulation of the product caused by the density difference that arise from heating. In an evaporator using tubing, the amount of evaporation that takes place depends on the temperature difference between the steam and the solution. Problems are arised if the tubes are not well immersed in the solution. If this occurs, the system will be dried out and circulation is compromised. In order to avoid this, forced circulation can be used by inserting a pipe to increase pressure in circulation. Forced circulation occurs when hydrostatic head prevents boiling at the heating surface. Common use of forced circulation evaporators include waste steams, crystallizers, viscous fluids, and other difficult process fluids such as suppressed boiling can reduce scaling and fouling. A pump is also used to avoid fouling that is caused by the boiling of liquid on the tubes. The pump also suppresses bubble formation. Other problems are that the residing time is undefined and the consumption of steam is very high, but at high temperature, good circulation is easily achieved. Natural or forced circulation evaporators have many advantages, which make them a popular choice in the industry. They are fairly compact and easy to clean and operate. They can also be easily adapted according to the product that needs to be obtained. They may have a high heat transfer coefficient as well as a high circulation flow, which both work to increase the efficiency of evaporator. But they have their own limitations. One of the most important limitation is its cost. Natural or forced circulation evaporators have a major role in the beverage or food industry. They are used for processes that produce tomato juice concentrate, fruit concentrate, and when water needs to be removed from certain raw materials in such a way as to maintain raw material properties. In general, forced circulation evaporator are required when the fouling characteristics of a liquid will cause problems if the liquid boils on a heating surface, as its pump reduces bubble formation. The forced circulation evaporators are also used with high solid content and high viscosity. Now let us learn about falling film evaporator. It is an industrial device to concentrate solutions, especially with very heat sensitive components. The evaporator is a special type of heat exchanger. Falling film evaporators are used extensively in chemical process industry, food and paper industry. They are also characterized by their very low pressure drops, therefore they can often be used in very deep vacuum application. The device is suitable for scale forming solution as boiling occur on the surface of the film. Now let us learn about rising film evaporator. There is a wide range of applications for rising tube evaporators, including effluent treatment, production of polymers, food production, thermal desalination, pharmaceuticals, and solvent recovery. In terms of application within these industries, rising tube evaporators are mainly used as reboilers for distillation columns or as concentrators or flash evaporators or preheaters designed to remove volatile components prior to stripping. A specific application of these type of evaporator is the thermal desalination of seawater. Seawater is pumped into the long tubes of the evaporator while the heating media heats it up. As vapor forms inside the tubes, it flows upwards. This evaporation occurs under vacuum condition that allows the use of lower temperatures. This evaporator is also used in juice concentration and food industry. As food industry requires very delicate products that are too sensitive to high temperature for long periods of time, rising film evaporators can operate quickly and efficiently enough to avoid having to expose the product to high temperatures which may damage or undermine its quality. Hence, they are suitable for concentrates in juice, milk, and other dairy products, which are products that require delicate handling in the food industry. While the rising film evaporators are relatively efficient and have several advantages, they are not as efficient as vertical or horizontal tube falling film evaporator. Moreover, rising film evaporators requires a driving force to move the film against gravity, and this causes a limitation because causes a requirement for sufficient temperature difference between the heating surfaces to provide the driving force. The major disadvantage of these type of evaporator is limited product versatility. Also, it requires the products to be of low viscosity and have minimal fouling tendencies. The next type of evaporators we have to learn about is climbing and falling film evaporator. They are used in wide range of applications. Fruit juice concentration, dairy industry. For evaporation via climbing and falling film plate design can minimize the effect of protein denaturation and thus optimizing the quality of dairy industry. Pharmaceuticals are also using this to remove as much as moisture possible for crystallization so that they can increase their preservance and improve their stability. Although most pharmaceutical products are extremely sensitive in temperature, this type of evaporator is still practical to be used since several designs of these evaporators are able to operate at very low pressure since the boiling point of water is low as pressure decreases. Instant and concentrated cooking ingredients such as pasta sauce, chicken broth, vegetable purees, etc. undergo evaporation through this evaporating equipment. Although they are relatively less sensitive to heat, evaporating them at low temperature and short residence time is crucial to maintain their quality, taste, texture, and nutritional value. Next is multiple effect evaporator. Unlike single stage evaporators, these evaporators can be composed of up to 7 evaporator stages. The energy consumption for single effect evaporators is very high and is most of cost of an evaporation system. Putting together evaporator saves heat and thus requires less energy. Adding one evaporator to the original decreases energy consumption up to 50%. Adding another effect reduces it up to 33%. A heat saving percent equation can be used to estimate how much will save by adding a certain number of effects. The number of effects in a multiple effect evaporator is usually restricted to 7 because after that, equipment cost approaches the cost savings of the energy requirement drop. There are two types of feeding which can be used in the multiple effect evaporator. Forward feeding takes place when the product enters the system to the first effect, which is at the highest temperature. Another method is the backward feeding. In this process, the dilute products are fed into the last effect, which has the lowest temperature, and are transferred from effect to effect, with the temperature increasing. Originally designed for concentrating sugar in the sugarcane juice, it has since become widely used in all industrial applications where large volumes of water must be evaporated, such as salt production and water desalination. Next is agitated thin film evaporator. Agitated thin film evaporators are very successful with difficult to handle products. Simply stated, the method quickly separates the volatile from the less volatile components using indirected heat transfer and mechanical agitation of the flowing product film under controlled conditions. The maximum separation is normally made under vacuum condition to maximize delta T while maintaining the most favorable product temperature so that the product only sees equilibrium condition inside the evaporator and can maximize volatile stripping and recovery. The main advantage is that rotating blades permits handling of extremely viscous solution. The device is suitable to concentrate solutions up to as high as 100 p viscosity. The criteria of selecting evaporator is made up of components including heat exchangers, manifolds, condenser, controls, and pumps. A well-designed evaporator should at the most: number 1. Be well designed to transfer heat at a rapid pace using minimum surface area. Second, be able to segregate vapor from the liquid concentrate effectively. 3. Be ideal for products that are being processed. 4. Be able to produce the right product. 5. Reduce fouling of heat transfer surfaces. 6th, be built with materials to minimize corrosion. Materials of construction. Evaporators can be constructed completely either in hot dipped galvanized steel, aluminium, or stainless steel, although combinations of stainless steel pipes or copper tubes with minimum aluminium fins are also possible. Each material of construction has its own advantages and disadvantages. Corrosion of evaporators due to contact with or in proximity to foodstuffs is a major concern in food processing facilities, especially the food products may have been contaminated with corrosion products formed. Moreover, corrosion may induce refrigerant leaks in the coils, giving rise to chemical contamination and may give result to very large losses to the whole industry. Galvanized steel is resistant to corrosion by alkaline cleaners, but zinc corrodes very quickly when exposed to acid and strong alkaline solution as well as steam. Galvanized steel also has higher surface roughness, often making it very difficult to maintain the required level of hygiene. Similarly, copper largely applied in tubes of evaporators can be quickly and severely affected by strong alkaline detergents but is very less sensitive to mild alkaline solution. It is also attacked by sodium hypochlorite acid and salty food, making it not really suitable in the food contact zone. Some volatile sulfur and nitrogen components present in food may accelerate the corrosion of water. As copper ions may leach from the copper metal, its surface roughness increases. Because of its antimicrobial properties, metallic copper is able to reduce the bacterial load but only to a very limited extent. Aluminium is more corrosion resistant than galvanized steel when exposed to acetic and citric acid, which is they present in dairy foods and citrus foods, fatty acids, which is present in anti-caking agents and lubricants, and lactic acids, which is present in bread, confectionery, beverages, fermentation, blood. Aluminium is also more corrosion resistant than galvanized steel in the presence of sodium chloride that is used in preservation of meats and vegetables, sulfur dioxide that is grape storage, and sulfide which is used in eggs. However, the protective aluminium oxide layer can be removed by highly alkaline solution and chlorinated products such as chlorine bleach, such as sodium hypochlorite. However, aluminium may resist mildly acidic and alkaline solution. With caustics, the use of silicates is recommended, but note that they form scale. Aluminium is sensitive to acid-based solution, requiring the use of corrosion inhibitors. Stainless steel is highly corrosion resistant but minimizes the potential for ammonia leaks in hostile environments and is also easily repaired in the field of welding. Stainless steel is sensitive to chlorides in acid conditions. Oxidizing agents such as peracetic acid can accelerate the corrosion process. Stainless steel is the suggested material to be used in the presence of nitrides because neither galvanized steel nor aluminium is recommended for exposure to nitrides. As an example, for the importance of selection for the materials of construction, galvanic corrosion occurs around the junction of aluminium fin and copper tube because both metals have different standard reduction potential. Especially in contact with marine food products, the galvanic corrosion will proceed very rapidly due to the deteriorating effect of seawater salts on both aluminium and copper. The joint between the copper tubes and aluminium fins is one of the weakest and most corrosion sensitive parts of an evaporator. To protect the increase of surface roughness and microporosity due to corrosion, it is very common practice to provide coils with a protective drip or spray coating. Besides covering coils with a smooth hard finish to increase corrosion resistance, Coatings quite also must reduce the buildup of dirt, the adhesion of microorganisms, the formation of biofilms, and the shedding of thaw water from the coil surfaces. However, coatings may become prone to delamination, spalling, swelling, blistering, distortion, as it could result in the formation of pores and cracks. The coating finally may peel off, releasing particles that can cause a very harmful safety hazard. As coating may deteriorate with time due to cleaning chemicals and abrasion or erosion by airborne particles, a program of regular maintenance and cleaning to prolong the life of coating and the coil is needed. Now let us learn about boiling point elevation. Since evaporators dealing with boiling solution and in particular with solution with non-volatile solutes, any calculation must account for the effect of boiling point elevation. The vapor pressure of an aqueous solution is less than that of pure water at the same temperature, so the boiling point of the same solution will be higher than that of water. This phenomena is called boiling point elevation or vapor pressure lowering. The boiling point of a solution is a colligative property. That is, it depends on the concentration of solute in the solution, but not on what the solute and solvent are. The equilibrium vapor rising from a solution exhibiting boiling point elevation will exist at a temperature and pressure such that it is superheated with respect to the pure vapor. The vapor rises at the solution boiling point, elevated with respect to the pure component boiling. The vapor, however, is solute free, so it won't condense until the extra heat corresponding to the elevation is removed. Thus, it is superheated. When working problems involving heat transfer to or from boiling solution, it is necessary to adjust the temperature difference driving force for the boiling point elevation. As we know that most evaporators produce concentrated solution having a boiling point substantially higher than that of water at the pressure prevailing in the vapor space. This difference of boiling point is generally called the boiling point elevation or the boiling point rise. Consider a strong solution of caustic soda that boils at 115 degrees Celsius at atmospheric pressure. If this solution is obtained from an evaporator operating under atmospheric pressure, the boiling point elevation of the solution is 115 minus 100 degrees Celsius, that is 15 degrees Celsius. The boiling point elevation of the thick liquor must be known before the calculation of the evaporator design are done, because this reduces the effective temperature driving force compared to the case of boiling the pure solvent. The boiling point of a solution can be calculated if the activity coefficient of the solvent in solution and the fugacity coefficient of the vapor are known. Although a lot of research work has been done on the thermodynamics of concentrated solution, it is still very difficult to theoretically calculate the boiling point elevation of concentrated solution, particularly for solution of non-electrolytes. Experimental boiling data for solution of different concentration and pressure are therefore very necessary. Derhinck's rule. For strong solution, one can take advantage of this rule. The boiling point of a given solution is a linear function of the boiling point of water at the same temperature. So, this lets us plot TPP solution against the TPP water and get a straight line for each concentration. Another way of thinking of these plots, they plot the temperature where the vapor pressure of the solution is equal to some fixed value against the temperature where the vapor pressure of water equals the same value. For Derhinck's plot to be valid, the range of the boiling points must be relatively very narrow and the solution must obey Raoult's law. For a particular system pressure, determine the boiling point of pure water. This can be done from the vapor pressure equation or steam table. Enter the plot from the bottom, trace up to the diagonal line representing the NOH fraction, then trace left to read the solution boiling point from the vertical axis. The boiling point elevation is the difference between the two temperatures. In many practical solutions, only a limited number of boiling point data are available. The best use of these data can be made by taking help of an empirical rule called the During's rule. The rule states that the boiling point of a solution of a given concentration is a linear function of the boiling point of function. Thus, through this rule, we plot the boiling point of the solution at several pressure against the corresponding boiling points of pure water. We can get a straight line. A set of straight lines will be obtained if such plots are made for solution of different concentration. However, we must understand that these lines which are plotted on the graph are not parallel, the slope being larger at higher concentration. The rule works good over moderate ranges of pressure but does not give satisfactory correlation at high pressure. Nevertheless, it is practically useful. The main advantage is that if the boiling points of a solution at two different pressures are known and the corresponding boiling points of the water are read from the steam tables, a During's line through the points can be drawn. This line can be used to predict the boiling point of a solution at any other pressure. If few such lines are drawn, the boiling point of any solution at any pressure can be estimated by interpolation. During's plot of caustic data solution is plotted here. You can see this. The boiling point of sodium hydroxide solution is there in the Fahrenheit. Boiling point of water is marked in the Fahrenheit. Boiling point of sodium hydroxide solution in degrees Celsius is here. Boiling point of water in degrees Celsius is on the upper x-axis. So this graph is about the caustic soda solution, and now let us learn about temperature driving force. Driving force for evaporation is the gradient of the water vapor pressure near the skin surface. The water vapor pressure is that part of the total pressure of the air that is caused by the molecules of water in it. The hotter the air, the more water it is capable of carrying. The driving force for heat transfer is the difference in the temperature difference between the steam in the coils and the product in the pan. The steam is produced in large boilers, generally tube and chest heat exchangers. The steam temperature is a function of steam pressure. Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius at 1 atm, but at other pressure the boiling point changes. At its boiling point, the steam condenses in the coils and gives up its latent heat. If the steam temperature is too high, burn-off or fouling increases, so there are limits to how high the steam temperature can go. The product is also at its boiling point. The boiling point can be elevated with an increase in the solute concentration. The boiling point is increased with the solute concentration. This boiling point elevation works on the same principle as freezing point depression. The total local pressure at any position in the tube is a sum of 1. Vapor chamber pressure, 2. Hydrostatic head, and 3. Frictional head loss. The liquid starts boiling at a level where its temperature rises to its saturation temperature under the local pressure of the liquid. Performance of an evaporator. There are three main measures of evaporator performance. First, capacity, measured in kg vaporized upon time. Second, economy, measured in kg vaporized upon kg steam input. Third, steam consumption, measured in kg by hour. The performance of a steam heated evaporator is measured in terms of its capacity and economy. Note that the measures are related since consumption is equal to capacity upon economy. Economic calculations are determined using enthalpy balances. The key factor in determining the economy of an evaporator is the number of effects. The economy of a single effect evaporator is always less than 1. Multiple effect evaporators have higher economy but lower capacity than single effect. The thermal condition of an evaporator feed has an important impact on economy and performance. If the feed is not already at its boiling point, heat effects are required to be considered. For example, if the feed is cold, below boiling point, some of the heat will be required in the evaporator to raise the feed to boiling point before evaporation can begin. This will reduce the capacity. If the feed is above the boiling point, some flash evaporation occurs on the entry. Capacity. Now let us learn about the capacity, which is one of the very important topic which is used to calculate the performance of an evaporator. Capacity is defined as the number of kilogram of water vaporized per hour. Capacity of evaporator is defined as the number of kilograms of water vaporized per evaporator per hour. The rate of heat transfer Q, the heating surface of evaporator, is the product of heat transfer surface area and the overall temperature drop. Q equals to U into A into T, where Q equals to rate of heat transfer, A equals to area of heat transfer surface, T the overall temperature drop. The capacity of an evaporator depends upon the temperature of the solution. If the feed of the solution is at the boiling temperature, the pressure in vapor space of an evaporator, all the heat supplied utilized for the evaporation, thus increasing the capacity of evaporator. Economy. Economy of an evaporator is the number of kilogram of water vaporized from all the effects per kilogram of steam used. Economy. Economy is the number of kg of water vaporized per kg of steam fed to the unit. The rate of heat transfer Q through the heating surface of an evaporator by the definition of overall heat transfer coefficient is the product of three factors, which are the area of heat transfer surface A, the overall heat transfer coefficient U, the overall temperature drop delta T. Hence, Q can be defined as U dot product A dot product delta T. Economy. Economy calculations. Economy calculations are determined using enthalpy balances. The key factor in determining the economy of an evaporator is the number of effects. The economy of a single effect evaporator is always less than 1. Multiple effect evaporators have higher economy but lower capacity than single effect. The thermal condition of an evaporator feed has an important impact on economy and performance. If the feed is not already at its boiling point, heat effects are to be considered. If the feed is cold, some of the heat going into the evaporator will be used to raise the feed to boiling point before evaporation can begin. Hence, this reduces the capacity. In theory, the evaporation of 1 kg of water requires slightly more than 1 kg of steam since the latent heat of vaporization decreases as pressure increases. As the steam's latent heat is transferred to the feed, some of the heat raises the initial feed temperature to the boiling point and the remaining latent heat evaporates water. Thus, the steam economy will always be less than 1. Depending on the initial feed temperature and system losses, the steam economy of a single effect evaporator typically is 0.75 to 0.95 kg water per kg steam. What I mean to say is the steam economy of a single effect evaporator will always lie between the values of 0.75 to 0.95 kg water per kg steam. Now let us learn about some mechanisms to increase the steam economy. We can increase the steam economy by preheating the feed, which can be done by using the vapors generated in the evaporator or by non-steam source. Also, steam generation is an expensive operation, so we can use multiple effect evaporators or we can use vapor recompression, thermal or mechanical. Consider the example of the single effect evaporator. For heat transfer to occur, the temperature of the saturated steam must be higher than the boiling temperature of the feed. If the latent heat of the water vapor leaving the evaporator can be reused, the steam economy can be increased. But because heat transfer requires a temperature gradient, the latent heat of the water vapor can only be transferred to a lower temperature fluid. The two primary means of improving the steam economy of an evaporator both involve manipulating temperature via pressure change. Note that the steam economy of an evaporator is highly dependent on the initial temperature of the feed as it enters the evaporator system and the properties of the liquid being concentrated. Feed that enters the first effect at a temperature above the boiling point first flashes some vapor before heat transfer within the evaporator even begins. Thus, the steam economy will be higher than if the initial feed temperature was below the boiling point, which will require heat transfer to the liquid before evaporation can occur. Boiling point rise, also called as BPE, is the difference between a solution's boiling point and the boiling point of pure water at the same pressure. Same solution, especially as they become more concentrated, may require a large temperature gradient to sufficiently transfer enough heat to reach the boiling conditions. High temperature gradients limit the number of effects that can be applied, thereby limiting the potential steam economy increase of a system. Also, since single-stage thermal and mechanical compressors are economically limited to compression ratios of about 2, which will produce a temperature increase of 5 to 20 degrees Celsius. Thus, the potential to increase the steam economy by adding effects, thermal or mechanical, may be constrained by the thermal and rheological properties of the liquid being concentrated. Now let us learn about what is thermal vapor recompression. TVR uses a steam ejector to compress the vapor leaving the evaporator vessel. In this application, the steam ejector is often called a thermocompressor. Its primary purpose is to compress vapor, but its secondary benefit is creating vacuum within the evaporator vessel. Uh, this is the diagram of the thermal vapor compression device. This is a thermocompressor, and this is the vapor to the condenser. This product is being uh, flushed out after the operation. Mechanical vapor recompression. Mechanical vapor recompression uses a mechanical compressor or fan to compress low pressure vapor leaving an evaporator to a higher pressure and temperature for reuse as the evaporation heat source. The internal reuse of the vapor also eliminates the need for an external condenser, which most evaporator systems need to condense the vapor before leaving the last effect. This is the diagram of a mechanical vapor recompression system. You can see it and understand it easily that how the process is carried out. Now let us learn about steam consumption, which is the third factor of inquiring or determining the performance of an evaporator. Steam consumption is very important because is very important to know and can be easily estimated by the ratio of capacity divided by the economy. That is, the steam consumption is defined by capacity upon economy. The single effect evaporator has low steam economy, that is about zero point 0.8. The capacity is about n times that of a single effect evaporator, and the economy is about zero point n times for an n effect evaporators. However, pumps, interconnecting pipes and valves are required for transfer of liquid from one effect to another, that increase both equipment and cost. Typical value of steam economy for multiple effect evaporator is greater than single and often lies between 2 to 3. Also, we have to know that in most cases, the heat in the steam is required to do two things: to produce a change in temperature in the product, that is providing a to providing the heating of the component, or to maintain the product temperature as heat is lost by natural causes or by design, that is providing a heat loss component. So basically steam economy provides two type of components: a heating component for that product, or by providing a heat loss component for the product. Now let us learn about heat transfer in evaporator. The rate equation for heat transfer takes the form Q equals to U into A into delta T, where Q stands for heat transfer per unit time. U is the overall coefficient of heat transfer, A is the heat transfer surface, and T is the temperature difference between the two streams. Applying this equation to evaporators, there may be some difficulty in deciding the correct value for the temperature difference because of what is known as boiling point rise or boiling point elevation. If the water is boiled in an evaporator under a given pressure, then the temperature of the liquor may be determined from the steam tables and the temperature difference is readily calculated. At the same pressure, a solution has boiling point greater than that of water, and the difference between its boiling point and that of water's boiling point is known as BPR or BPE. For example, at atmospheric pressure 101.3 kN per meter square, a 25% solution of sodium chloride boils at 381 Kelvin and shows a BPR of 8 degree Kelvin. If steam at 389 Kelvin were to be used to concentrate the salt solution, the overall temperature difference would not be 389 by minus 373 equals to 16 degree Kelvin, but 389 minus 381 equals to 8 degree Kelvin. Such solutions usually require more heat to vaporize unit mass of water so that the reduction in the capacity of a unit may be considerable. During's rule is often used to calculate the change in BPR with pressure. During's rule state that the boiling point of given solution is a linear function of the boiling point of pure water at the same pressure. Thus, if the boiling point of the solution is plotted against that of water at the same pressure, then a straight line is obtained. Thus, if the pressure is fixed, the boiling point of water is found from steam tables and the boiling point of the solution from During's plot. Different lines are obtained for different concentrations. The boiling point rise is much greater with strong electrolytes such as salt and caustic soda. Now let us learn about fouling. Occurs when the hard deposits form on the surface of the mediums in the evaporators. In foods, proteins and polysaccharides can create such deposits that reduce the efficiency of heat transfer. Foaming can also create since dealing with the excess foam can be costly in time efficiency. Anti-foam agents are to be used, but only a few used when food is being processed. Fouling is the accumulation of unwanted material on solid surfaces. The fouling materials can consist of either living or non-living substances. Fouling is usually distinguished from other surface growth phenomena in that it occurs on the surface of a component, system, or plant performing a defined and useful function, and that the fouling process impedes or interferes with this function. Fouling presents the most difficult challenge to the design and operation of membrane process. Fouling in the preheat system for crude oil distillation has become one of the most challenging issues within the refinery industry. For a single crude oil distillation unit, the cost due to fouling can reach magnitudes of millions of dollars per year as it introduces additional resistance to thermal convection and fluid flow, which leads to higher energy and pump operation process. The most fundamental and most preferred method of controlling fouling is to prevent the ingress of the fouling species into the cooling water circuit. Chemical fouling inhibitors can also reduce the fouling in many systems, mainly by interfering with the crystallization, attachment, or consolidation steps of the fouling process. For example, chelating agents, long-chain aliphatic amines or polyamines, organic phosphonic acids, or polyelectrolytes are usually used. For fired boilers, aluminium or magnesium additives can be lower the melting point of ash and promote creation of deposits which are easier to remove. On the component design level, fouling can often be minimized by maintaining a relatively high and uniform fluid velocity throughout the component. Stagnant regions needs to be eliminated. Chemical or mechanical cleaning for the removal of deposits and scales is regularly recommended when fouling reaches the point of impacting the system, performance, or an onset of significant fouling-induced degradation, that is, corrosion. These processes compromise pickling with acids and complexing agents, cleaning with higher velocity water jets. Now the next topic which poses a very great threat to evaporators is corrosion. Corrosion can occur when the acidic solutions such as citrus juices are concentrated. The surface damage caused can shorten the long life of evaporators. Quality and the flavor of food can also suffer during evaporation. Overall, when choosing an evaporator, the qualities of the product solution need to be taken into careful consideration to deal with the corrosion of the evaporators. Corrosive environments in evaporators include immersion, splashing, and vapor. As always, the key to avoiding corrosion-related failures is inspection. Visual inspection is often very much sufficient to determine if carbon steel is corroding or if stainless steels are experiencing IGA. Selection of evaporators is also a very important phenomena which depends upon the type of solution. Mainly there are few important factors like solution viscosity, heat sensitivity of the solute, scaling of fouling characteristics of the solution, corrosiveness, presence of suspended solids, and foaming characteristics. One more thing we have to keep in mind is about the marine use. Large ships usually carry evaporating plants to produce fresh water, thus reducing their reliance on shore-based supplies. Steam ships must be able to produce high-quality distillate in order to maintain boiler water levels. Diesel engine ships often utilized waste heat as an energy source for producing fresh water. In this system, the engine cooling water is passed through a heat exchanger where it is cooled by concentrated seawater. Because the cooling water is at a temperature of 70 to 80 degrees Celsius, it would not be possible to flash off any water vapor unless the pressure in the heat exchanger vessel was dropped. To alleviate this problem, a brine air ejector venturi pump is used to create a vacuum inside the vessel. Partial evaporation is achieved and the vapor passes through a demister before reaching the condenser section. Seawater is pumped through the condenser section to cool the vapor sufficiently to precipitate it. The distillate gathers in a tray from where it is pumped to the storage tanks. A salinometer monitors salt content and diverts the flow of distillate from the storage tanks if the salt content exceeds the alarm limit. Sterilization is carried out after the evaporator. This is a very practical use of evaporator in the day-to-day lives where the evaporators is used by the large ships to produce the fresh water from the seawater so that they can reduce their reliance on the shore-based supplies. Usually, large ships are used to transport the products for a very distance places which are very far away from each other. So evaporator the evaporator placed on them can easily produces fresh water from the sea without and decrease their chances of going water free or depending upon the shore based supplies. So evaporator is placed in these ships so that they can easily function without any tension if they have no supply from the surface for the clean water. With this, I would like to say that I have completed all the information which is required on the topic, the performance and economy of evaporators. I am very thankful that I was given this chance to show or demonstrate how performance or capacity of the evaporators is affected. Thank you and have a good day. Lastly, I would like to remind that my name is Tanishtha Gupta. My roll number is 19112101. I am from Chemical Engineering Department, second year, fourth semester.